There's a version of your life you keep comparing yourself to, not someone else's life, yours. The version where you should have figured it out by now. The version where you're further along, more stable, more successful, more something. You carry that version around like a measuring stick. And every time you look at where you actually are, it doesn't match. And that gap, that space between where you are and where you think you should be, that's where most of your suffering lives. Not in what's actually happening, but in the story that it should be happening differently, faster, sooner, already. You scroll through your phone and see someone your age doing the thing you've been dreaming about, and something tightens in your chest, not because you're jealous, not really, but because their timeline just became evidence against yours. Proof that you're behind. Proof that whatever you've been doing, it hasn't been enough. And that feeling, that quiet, heavy feeling of being late to your own life, it follows you everywhere, into your mornings, into your conversations, into the moments where you should feel proud of how far you've come, but instead feel haunted by how far you haven't gone. But here's what no one tells you about that feeling. It's a lie, not a small one, a foundational one that's been shaping your decisions, your self-worth, and your entire relationship with time for years. And until you see it for what it is, it will keep running your life from the background, like software you never agreed to install. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about what it actually means to trust your own timing. Not as a nice quote on a sunset background, but as a real, livable, bone-deep way of moving through the world. You've been taught from a very young age that life has a schedule. Graduate by this age. Get the career by that one. Find the relationship. Build the thing. Hit the milestone. And if you don't, something's wrong with you. Not wrong with the timeline, wrong with you. And so you internalized it. You turned someone else's map into your GPS. And now every time life takes a turn that wasn't on the route, you panic. You recalculate. You assume you made a wrong turn somewhere. But you didn't. You were just never on that road to begin with. You were on yours. And yours doesn't look like theirs. It was never supposed to. But that's hard to accept when the whole world is showing you what on time is supposed to look like. When every algorithm is designed to show you people who arrive before you. When even the people who love you ask questions that carry an invisible clock. So, what's the plan? When are you going to... Have you thought about... They don't mean harm. But every question lands like a reminder that you're not where you're supposed to be. And slowly, without realizing it, you start rushing. Not towards something you want, but away from the shame of not having it yet. And that's the trap. Because the moment you start making decisions based on the fear of being behind, you stop making decisions based on what's actually right for you. You take the job not because it fits, but because it looks like progress. You stay in the relationship not because it's healthy, but because starting over would set you back. You say yes to things your body is screaming no to, because saying no means more waiting. And you're terrified of waiting, because waiting feels like failure, like stagnation, like everyone is moving and you're standing still. But you're not standing still. You've never been standing still. You just can't see what's being built because you're too busy watching everyone else's construction site. Here's something that might sound strange, but stay with it for a second. What if the delay, is the thing that saves you. Not a punishment, not a sign you're doing it wrong, but the actual mechanism that protects you from getting what you want before you're ready to hold it. Think about it. Think about the things you wanted desperately 2 or 3 years ago. The job, the person, the opportunity. Now think about who you were then. Really think about it. Would that version of you have been able to sustain what you were asking for? Most of the time, the honest answer is no. You wanted the destination, but you hadn't become the person who could live there yet. And life, in its frustrating, silent, unglamorous way, knew that. Not because the universe is conspiring against you, but because some things genuinely cannot land until you've built the foundation to hold them. A building doesn't fail because the architect is slow. It fails because someone rushed past the foundation to get to the penthouse, and that's what most people do with their lives. They skip the invisible, underground, thankless work of becoming and jump straight to wanting the visible result. And when it doesn't come, they assume they're broken. You're not broken. You're being built. And the building is taking longer than you expected, because what's coming is bigger than what you originally planned for. But let's be honest, knowing this doesn't always make it easier, because trust isn't a thought, it's a practice. And practicing it when everything inside you is screaming, you're falling behind. That takes something most people never develop. It takes the ability to sit in the uncertainty without filling it with panic. Most people can't do that. The moment things slow down, the moment there's a gap between where they are and where they want to be, they flood that gap with worry, with comparison, with worst-case scenarios, with frantic action that looks productive but is actually just fear wearing a different outfit. You've done this. You know the feeling. You start a project not because the timing is right, but because you can't stand the stillness anymore. You send the text not because you have something to say, but because the silence was eating you alive. You make the decision not because you have clarity, but because not deciding felt like drowning. And then later, sometimes weeks later, sometimes years, you realize that the rushed version wasn't the right one. That if you had just waited a little longer, listened a little deeper, sat in the discomfort a little more patiently, the right answer would have shown itself. Not because you forced it, but because you gave it room. That's what trusting your timing actually looks like. Not blind optimism. Not sitting on your couch hoping the universe delivers success to your doorstep. It's the mature, grounded decision to stop forcing things into existence before they're ready. To stop yanking fruit off the tree before it's ripe, and then wondering why it tastes bitter. And here's where it gets deeper. When you stop rushing your own life, something shifts inside your chest. Something loosens. You start breathing differently, not because anything external changed, but because you finally stopped holding your breath, waiting for the next thing to happen. You start to notice the life that's already here, the one you've been sprinting past for years, the quiet morning that doesn't need to be optimized, the conversation that doesn't need to lead anywhere, the walk that doesn't need a podcast, the version of yourself that exists right now, not the future one you've been chasing, but this one, the one who's been quietly carrying everything and never once got thanked for it. Most people are so focused on becoming that they've completely abandoned being. They live in a permanent state of not yet successful enough, not yet healed enough, not yet ready. And they think that one day, when they finally arrive, they'll give themselves permission to exhale. But that day doesn't come, because the finish line keeps moving. Every time you reach it, your mind draws a new one, And you spend your entire life running toward a destination that doesn't exist, missing every single view along the way. Trusting your timing is the decision to stop running, not to stop moving, to stop running. There's a difference. Moving is intentional. Running is fear-based. Moving comes from clarity. Running comes from the terror of being still. Now here's the part that most people aren't ready to hear. Some of you aren't behind. You're ahead. You're ahead of a timeline you can't see yet. The things that didn't work out, the closed doors, the failed attempts, the relationships that fell apart, those weren't setbacks. Those were redirections. They were life pulling you out of a lane that would have taken you somewhere smaller than where you're actually headed. But because we've been trained to measure progress by visible results, the redirection feels like regression. You can't see the new path yet, so you assume there isn't one. You interpret the silence as abandonment, the waiting as wasted time, the in-between as nowhere. But the in-between is where all the real work happens. It's where your character gets built, where your clarity gets sharpened, where you learn the difference between what you want and what you actually need. The in-between is not the gap between chapters. It is the chapter. And most people skip it because it doesn't look impressive from the outside. Nobody posts about the in-between. Nobody celebrates the season where nothing is happening yet. Nobody tells you that the most transformative period of your life will probably look, from the outside, like you're doing nothing. But on the inside, everything is shifting, quietly, slowly, in ways that only make sense later. And here's the thing about other people's timelines that you really need to understand. You're watching their highlight reel and comparing it to your behind the scenes. You're seeing the announcement, the celebration, the result. You're not seeing the 3 years of doubt that came before it, the moments they almost quit, the nights they questioned everything, the seasons where they felt exactly like you feel right now, behind, lost, running out of time. Everyone is struggling with time. Everyone feels like they should be further along. The person you're envying right now is probably envying someone else. It's an endless chain of people measuring themselves against a clock that doesn't actually exist. Because there is no universal clock. There's no cosmic schedule that says you need to have it figured out by 25 or 30 or 40. That schedule was invented by people who needed a way to feel like they were winning. And it's been weaponized against anyone whose path doesn't fit the mold. Your path was never going to fit the mold. You were never going to follow the straight line. And the sooner you stop apologizing for your detours, the sooner you'll realize they were the most important part of the journey. Let me ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with this. What would your life feel like if you truly believed you were on time? Not ahead, not behind, on time. Exactly where you need to be, for reasons you might not understand yet. How would you wake up in the morning? What would you stop worrying about? What decisions would you make differently? What would you stop forcing? What would you finally let go of? Because that feeling, that imaginary feeling of being on time, it's not something that arrives when your circumstances change. It's something you choose. It's a posture, a way of standing inside your own life without flinching, without apologizing, without constantly checking over your shoulder to see who's ahead of you. And when you choose it, when you actually commit to the belief that your timeline is valid even when it's slow, even when it's messy, even when it doesn't look like anyone else's, something in you settles. The frantic energy calms. The desperate decision-making stops. The constant comparison loses its grip. And from that settled place, you start making different choices. Better ones. Not choices born from panic, but from patience. Not from fear of missing out, but from trust that what's for you will not miss you. There's a kind of strength in patience that most people will never understand, because patience has been rebranded as passivity, as weakness, as not wanting it badly enough. But real patience, the kind that holds steady when nothing is blooming, when the soil looks empty, when the season feels endless. That's one of the hardest things a human being can practice. It requires you to believe in something you can't see, to keep going without proof that it's working, to resist the urge to dig up the seed just to check if it's growing. And that's what you've been doing, isn't it? Digging up the seed, checking on it, pulling it out every few days to see if anything's changed, and then wondering why nothing's taken root. Some things need to be left alone to grow. Your healing, your purpose, your next chapter. They're not ignoring you. They're forming. And the more you interfere, the more you delay the very thing you're desperate to experience. So maybe the most radical thing you can do right now isn't to push harder, isn't to set another goal, isn't to create another 5-year plan. Maybe the most radical thing is to let this season be what it is, to stop calling it a waste, to stop treating it like a failure, to look at where you are, right here, right now, and say, this is part of it, and I trust it. Not because you have evidence, not because someone promised you it would all work out, but because you've survived every single season that came before this one, every delay, every disappointment, every moment where it felt like your life would never move forward. And yet here you are, still standing, still breathing, still reaching for something more. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's resilience that most people will never have. And it didn't come from the easy seasons. It came from the ones that looked exactly like this one. So no, you're not behind. You're not late. You're not failing. You're in the middle of something you can't see yet. And one day, probably sooner than you think, you're going to look back at this exact moment and understand why it had to take this long, why you had to wait, why the door didn't open when you first knocked. And when that day comes, you're not going to wish you had rushed. You're going to be grateful you trusted. So here's what I want you to carry with you, not as a quote to screenshot, not as a mantra to repeat without feeling, but as something you actually let in. Your life is not behind schedule. It's unfolding in the only order it could. And every moment you spend fighting that, comparing, rushing, panicking, is a moment you miss the beauty of what's already growing beneath the surface. You don't need to catch up. You need to calm down. You need to let your life breathe. Let the process be the process. Let the timing be what it is. And trust, not blindly, not passively, but deeply, that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. And if this reached something real in you, if something inside you felt lighter even for a second, then let that be your sign. Not that everything's about to change overnight, but that you're closer than you think. And the fact that you're here, listening, open, still willing to trust, that tells me everything I need to know about where you're headed. Drop the word trust in the comments. Not for me, for you. A small, quiet anchor to remind yourself that you don't have to have it all figured out today. You just have to keep showing up. And if you want more of this, no hype, no performance, just honest conversations that actually stay with you. Subscribe. We're building something real here, and I'm glad you're part of it. See you in the next one.